I love a secret agent story. I mean, who doesn't? Globe-trotting, chasing bad guys, dressing snazzy, cool cars and martinis. What's not to like? They're serious, but always a little silly too, which is something I can totally get behind. And that brings me to Golgo 13, top secret episode on the NES. When I sat down to give this game a genuine playthrough, I thought I knew what I was in for. And in terms of being a fun, fast-paced assassin-for-hire game with lots of plot twists and more melodrama than you can shake a stick at, I guess I got what I expected. What I wasn't prepared for though was what I learned after I played the game. To put it simply, the lore and fandom behind the Golgo 13 franchise is super deep. And we'll get into that in a minute, but regardless of the backstory, it's still a really cool assassin-for-hire story set in the 60s, with lots of espionage and bad guys, pretty girls, the whole thing. So tonight we're going to take a look back at Golgo 13, top secret episode on the NES. It's awesome and ridiculous, incredibly frustrating, but a total blast to play. And probably one of the hardest NES games I've played through in a long time. But it's 100% worth it. You'll see what I mean. Golgo 13 top secret episode is based on the Japanese Golgo 13 manga series, which I found out is actually the oldest manga still in publication, going all the way back to 1968. I don't care who you are, that's impressive. There are also a handful of really good animes in this franchise, including the movie Golgo 13 The Professional from 1983, which I just watched after playing this game, and it's amazing. And it does help explain what exactly this game was trying to be all about, because honestly, at first blush, it's hard to know what the hell's going on. All I knew about Golgo 13 was it was a really hard game my brother bought and I was too scared to get into. Look, I wasn't the smartest kid, but I knew enough to stick to games that didn't make him throw a controller at the age of like 10, so... But as I said, it's actually an amazing game in its own right. And though it is almost infuriatingly difficult at times, it's got a story that's way more detailed than what most NES games were offering back in 1988. So let's get into it. The story of Golgo 13 top secret episode definitely plays out like a manga. In this game, you take on the role of the infamous assassin Duke Togo, also known as Golgo 13. As the story opens, we see a helicopter carrying a deadly biological weapon called Cassandra G as it's shot down over New York City. And because, of course he is, Golgo 13 is framed for this incident as an M16 shell casing, which also happens to be our hero's weapon of choice, is found at the scene. Now, every good plot needs a catalyst, and as the game officially starts, we meet Maria Lovelet in an airport and learn that an international organization called Fixer believes Golgo 13 is innocent. They're working with a man named Condor that seems to have info on the vaccine to Cassandra G, and somebody's trying to take him out because of it. Fixer wants to hire you to investigate Condor's would-be assassins, find out where the vaccine is, and take out the mystery group's leader. Yeah, just another day in the life of Duke Togo.
Well, he always did have an inflated opinion of himself.
And once we've saved Condor, he lets us know where the evil group's hideout is, but only moments after he gets shot out of nowhere. Wasting no time, however, you head to the local hotel in town. You're still in Berlin at this point, but that's not important, and get a little information from Cherry Grace. And a little something else, if you know what I mean. It is a secret agent game after all. It'd feel empty without a little romance. And once you secure yourself some scuba gear, you're off to find the enemy base. And once you arrive and fight off all the bad guys in the way, you connect with Oz Wyndham, who was looking into the helicopter incident when he was taken captive by the bad guys. Of course, Golgo 13 is happy to help, but what we're really after is where the vaccine and the boss have headed off to, which is apparently like 1,300 miles away in Greece for some reason. A short while later in sunny Athens, we meet up once again with Cherry Grace, but this time we're all business as we order ourselves a custom M16 with electric percussion and a push-button style, whatever that means.
It's a Smith & Wesson. And you've had your 6.
As you're about to collect that sweet piece of hardware, your delivery person is shot down, and she reveals the gun has been stolen, and the thief ran off, which means you're off on another chase. From here, you run into Cherry Grace again, who tells you she stumbled upon the enemy base location, underwater, so that's where you're headed now. A quick swim through shark-infested waters and past the base's enemies, and you meet up with John Brudos, the inventor of the Cassandra virus, who was kidnapped the night of the explosion. And he tells you the Drek organization, the secret organization behind all this, is moving a cache with your gun in it to a new location. Before too long, you run into a mysterious man who claims to have your gun and your lady friend and says you're gonna die in Greece. I guess he gets away for a bit though, so now you're headed to yet another hotel where a Miss Eve Christie is now waiting for you upstairs. Deja vu, right? Well, Eve tells you she's with Fixer and has a message from Cherry Grace, who's been kidnapped and being held underwater in a base nearby. You're gonna help her tomorrow, but you're stuck waiting for the night, so Why not hook up with Eve, right? The next morning, boots freshly knocked, you're sent off to another location where you run into Spartacus. He's been hired to kill you, but he and his submachine gun are no match for you, right, Golgo 13? Of course not. Anyhow, now Oz Wyndham, the guy who we met the first time we scuba dived into a base, has a helicopter ready for you and you take to the skies for your next journey. But this is no ordinary helicopter, oh no. There's a bomb on board and you, cunning little assassin that you are, dive off the thing moments before it blows up. Now if things weren't already loony enough, now you're going to swim into another underwater base where you meet the real Oz Wyndham. He says almost exactly the same thing as his imposter did, only we find out now the vaccine and the boss man are headed to Rio. This very real Oz this time also tells you that Eve, that's the girl you just slept with, is actually the Drek boss's girlfriend. Lovely. Oh, and they're taking the cash, which still includes your special gun, in a seaplane to Brazil, which you should chase after, but not before you go rescue Cherry, who's still in the city. See? You have a lot going on right now. One long and winding maze later, and you save Cherry, who tells you she's off to Rio now, but still in the maze is a clue to how this whole sinister plot was set up in the first place. And when you find that note, written by someone named Smirk, you see that this Drek organization is being rebuilt with plans to take over the world. But they gotta take out Golgo 13 first. So no pressure. A brief moment later and you're in Rio. Bem-vindo ao Brazil. We meet up with Cherry and she says things are about to go down in the middle of the Amazon and the bad guys are using a plane built by a company called Fanebacks. Word in the jungle is the Drek Empire is looking to sell the Cassandra G virus. Oh, and they also still have your gun. The first thing you'll find in this massive forest is, wait for it, Eve, the bad guy's girlfriend. Only now she feels bad for deceiving you. And she tells you she got in with Drek's leader to get revenge for the death of her parents and how to get to the Drek leader's base, and would you believe it, you have to scuba dive again to get there. Good thing she brought you another scuba suit and spear gun, I guess. Okay, get this. When you get to the base, you find the guy you're supposed to think is the Drek boss, but as he's breaking down how you should have already died, bang, Eve shoots him dead. Now, as she's telling you she only wants peace from here on out and the Drek boss is on Alexander Island, boom, now she's shot too. I know, it's a lot to keep up with. Finally, you're face to face with a mysterious man who keeps giggling at you, and he says you've got 6 minutes to live before a bomb goes off, so you bail out and make your way to Alexander Island. It gets a little hard to follow here because the dialogue is all screwed up, but Little Man repeats part of what he said back in the Amazon and then says, "Our bows will teach you what souvenirs you can take back from here." I honestly have no idea what that's supposed to mean.
Positively shocking.
But that's okay, because now you're in yet another goddamn maze. Making your way out of this one, you're finally in front of the real Drek boss, the big bad guy, Smirk. He threatens you in broken English with, I guess, another version of you? Well, that's what happens next. So here you are, face to face with yourself. And you say, well, we can't have a clone out here running around as Golgo 13, so, now you're in another maze for some reason. I'm guessing you're chasing the clone guy around for a while, because pretty soon you're back in a base, then you're scuba diving into another base, and I don't really get what's going on here for a minute. But when you finally make it to the end of this last area, you see a brain in a computer who says it is in fact the enemy you've been looking for. Basically, it's Smirk's brain, but through Drek technology, it can just keep pumping out clones of itself forever, staying alive for all time if it wants. Now, this brain thingy gives you 3 minutes to take it out, or a nuclear bomb will go off, of course, but when you proceed to do so, because you're still a badass assassin, the brain tries to escape. Hero that you are, you take it out with one last single badass shot from the M16. And that's the end, my friends. How does the story wrap up? Who ends up happily ever after? We'll never know. Congratulations on playing Golgo 13. I don't really have a lot left to say after that about the story. It's ridiculous, frustratingly complex, confusing, still kind of badass, but not very satisfying. So we might as well talk about that zany gameplay. I won't spend a ton of time on this part because by seeing the story unfold, you already got the idea that there are a few specific modes in this game. The first one is a side-scrolling portion where you can jump incredibly high for some reason, jump kick, which isn't very useful, or you can shoot, but not while you're crouching. You spend most of this time going in one direction, then the other, avoiding bad guys who shoot at you, and they can shoot at you while crouching, which is fun. The next mode up is a gallery shooter style section, which happens at certain occasions during all other phases. In this, you switch to a scope view and you're taking out enemies in 360 degrees, on the ground and in the sky. There are also some of these that take place in the sky and some that take place underwater. None of them are particularly easy, but when they finish, you go back to what you were doing before. Another mode is the helicopter flights you take. These are pretty straightforward side-scrolling shoot-'em-up sections where you can move vertically and laterally and rapid-fire your way out of a sticky situation. Nothing particularly special about these, but they're a nice change of pace every now and again. The scuba diving sections are pretty straightforward, except you're using a harpoon instead of a regular gun. And the enemies include stationary bombs that you can't take out, other scuba guy enemies, some torpedoes, octopuses, and sharks. They're kinda hectic, but definitely not the hardest parts of the game. No, the hardest parts of the game for me were the first-person maze sections. These mazes play a little like Shadowgate to me, but there's basically no difference between one area and the next. Honestly, they're huge, and they feel endless at times. There's no hints to be found, no map to look at, you just have to go around and around until you find your way out. And some of these mazes are incredibly hard to figure out, with trapdoors everywhere, several levels to navigate, plus enemies shooting at you and lasers hitting you all the time. Simply put, these parts of the game suck. Now in the side-scrolling, helicopter, and underwater modes, your health is slowly dissipating as you stand around. The only way to recover it is to actually kill people, which is something you're going to want to do basically all the time to stay alive. It's also how you get more ammo, so that's nice. Regardless of the mode you're in, the controls are pretty straightforward, except the A and B buttons are switched around from most NES games, which takes a little getting used to. There are no real power-ups or new weapons, except in the mazes where you can collect ammo from time to time, and I believe there are some health items to collect, but they only count in the mazes. The last point I want to make about the gameplay is an important one. There are no saves in this game. There are checkpoints, though some of them will have you retracing your steps a long time if you die, but if you turn off the game, you don't get a password to get back. And the game is pretty long. I think it took me 4 or 5 hours in total to get through. Probably a little quicker if you had a map for some of the mazes, but yeah, that's a little harsh. Like if you had to start all over after 3 hours of work. Personally, it took a lot out of me to get through it in one sitting.
I wouldn't know. I've never lost.
Now, the music in Golgo 13 is pretty decent for a late 80s NES game, but it's nothing spectacular. In fact, there are some parts where the music actually drove me nuts, but I think that had a lot more to do with the level that I was on than the music itself, so I'm trying not to judge it too harshly. Graphically, there are some parts I thought were really cool, with some noir elements and kind of reminiscent of Ninja Gaiden. Some of the main parts were a little lacking for 1988, if I'm honest. The side-scrolling's a little repetitive, but they did keep the backgrounds and level designs unique from each other, so, that much is good. That said, the underwater levels are all pretty much the same and kind of remind me of the Ninja Turtles, if I'm honest. Where the graphics really fell apart to me is the mazes. I already bitched about this a little, but when almost every element of each maze and each floor is the same except for a color, I feel like a little effort would have gone a long way. Which is kind of my takeaway for the design of this game as a whole. With a little extra effort, I think the playability could have improved a lot. So there we have it. Golgo 13 top secret episode on NES. It's hard to judge this game, honestly, because some parts were awesome, some were absolutely bananas, and others were a nightmare. If nothing else, I can say this game is full of extremes, and you can't say that about every title Nintendo came out with. I do still think it's worth a play, honestly, especially when you think of the history behind the whole Golgo 13 franchise. But don't go into it expecting some amazing story with a great wrap-up, because it's not here. The story is interesting, without question, but it will definitely leave you a little confused. It's just something you should play so you can say you played it, I think. Oh, and evidently they made another English translated Golgo 13 game after this, which I haven't played and I'm not sure I will. Hey, you might give that a shot, since the second game in a series often improves on the first. If you do, let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.